real estate is just its own animal. When people ask me about investing tips or anything like that, I'm like, buy property.
That property has traded hands 3 times.
Since then?
Since then.
Up in price?
Up in price every single time. This is super early on. I had no idea you could buy debt.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've learned that now. But yeah, at the beginning, I didn't know that either.
And there's maybe even people listening to this podcast.
That'd probably
So
like,
explain,
Todd, Jordan, you're so stupid. How do you not know that?
How do you
Sorry,
not know
guys.
that?
I'm sorry.
Welcome to Beyond Wealth Podcast /
Home Sweet Holt.
Home Sweet Holt, a little collab.
Yeah. I love the collab.
So we used to obviously do a podcast together, Cash
Yeah.
Flow Bros,
Yeah.
RIP, Rob.
See ya.
And he's in Tampa fully now.
We miss him.
But in the process of doing that podcast, obviously we had a lot of deal breakdowns. And one on the list that we never got to was my 32 door.
Yeah.
And we were talking the other day. I was like, why don't we just talk about it? And it'll be on your podcast, it'll be on my podcast.
People need to
just,
know. People love the multifamily stuff. I mean, they ask about it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to, it's what got you into real estate, right? So maybe somebody else can learn from that, learn from your mistakes, learn from your good things that happen from
the bad things.
The bad things, the good things, but that's good things. So maybe somebody else can learn from it. I think that's good to sit down and talk about, the ins and outs of it.
We'll get that to in a second, but tell me a little bit about what's going on with you lately. I know that you wrapped up a flip, got it sold, crossbow's done, and
done.
You're on to the next one,
Done.
right?
Yeah, that crossbow, boy, that was real touch and go there for a little bit, but we got it done, and thanks to the listing agent over here, got that squared away. Working on one now over in West Goldmire Estates. It's like right below the Red Mountain walking trail park area. So it's a really nice area. The neighborhood's really great. It's old. All of the lawns are cut, which if you go into any neighborhood and you see that there's even few lawns that aren't cut, you're like, I don't know. But it's in a good area, and we're going to be finished probably end of this week, early next week.
That's awesome. All the lawns are cut except for your construction project.
Except for, and it's funny because I actually drove up this morning to pick up the trash from there. And I was like, my God, I'm the only one here without my yard cut. I'm going to have to go out there sometime this week when it's 98 degrees and get my push mower.
Dude, it's so hot right now.
It's so hot.
I am grateful that we had a really good spring. And
Yeah.
it pushed into what is summer, but the summer is full here.
Just, and I feel bad because I read an article the other day about the UK having a heat wave coming through for 3 days, and they're concerned for people's health and safety. And it's going to be 28 degrees Celsius, which, if you know what that is in American, it's 78 degrees.
Oh,
That's
very
their heat
toasty.
wave. How cute, Meanwhile, we're at 96 degrees out here, 85% humidity.
Yeah, full on humidity.
Yeah.
Good night. So
Everything's going good on my end. Buying, selling, the market's kind of going all over the place depending on who you hear it from. But it's pretty good. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
well, let's dive in, dude.
Let's talk about it.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start at how you found it, or how you found the partners? Because you didn't take this one on yourself, right?
Yeah. So, I grew up in Colorado.
No. Oh, fine. So back in 1987.
Let's start back there. No, so this is very early on, in my journey of real estate investing.
Yeah.
We had one rental, really didn't touch real estate outside of that. And, I got to a point where I was like, hey, I think I want to start doing more in real estate, and started running numbers of, as most people do, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
Start running numbers of like, oh, how do you get another rental property? Because we only had one, and we had bought it with a conventional loan. So it was kind of already set up, and
it's easy.
I didn't know about numbers. I was just like, I think it'll rent and cover the mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah.
a little bit more.
A lot of people do that. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it's working, when really it probably was barely breaking even, but it at the time worked. But I was like, okay, what's the next step? So it was actually really trying to learn the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And talked with Rob, actually sat down with coffee with me. A few other guys sat down with coffee, and they're like, you need to find off-market properties.
Yeah.
Because I was running stuff on MLS. I would look at property and try to run it, and I was just like, even stuff that needed rehabbing, and it was like, this is really hard to make these numbers work. Like everybody's saying they should work, and you just have to buy right.
Yeah.
So they were like, if you're going to rehab and do the BRRRR strategy, you really can't even buy distressed properties off of MLS, you need to find them off market.
Which is true. Everybody watching, I have so many buyers that are like, it's not making sense on market. It's hard because those are market numbers.
Yeah.
You have to find a way around that.
Yeah. And oftentimes the truly distressed stuff just doesn't make it to market because it's not marketable to the masses. It really has to be a cash buyer.
Yeah.
And the true cash buyers who know how to come in and actually close on a property are not just falling off of trees.
No.
So anyway, all that to say is I'm just throwing stuff on the wall, just trying. And I come across, I'm looking on Facebook, looking for properties, trying to figure out how to find off-market properties.
Yeah. It's weird. I still have some problems with that.
Yeah.
It's not easy for anybody jumping in to just go find off-market. They make it sound so easy.
Yeah, and it's not.
Easy. It's just not easy.
And so I'm just surfing through, and I find this 32-door complex for $5,000, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And then I'm like, "Okay, $5,000. What's going on?" And I'm like, "This can't be adding up." And so, long story short, is they basically were selling the tax deed. Theoretically, they actually didn't have the tax deed, but they were trying to say, or sorry, it wasn't $5,000. It was $50,000.
Okay.
For 32 doors that needed to be rehabbed. And so I dig into it and I'm like, well, $50,000 seems pretty cheap. So, and I'm just like, I've got a lead. I'm trying it. I'm figuring it out. So I call this person, try to figure it out. And I find out, they've got a tax deed. They don't actually have the property. So I'm like, okay, what's that? So then I talk to a lawyer who, I'm Googling around. I find this lawyer who does a lot of tax deed and does some like education, and I get her on the phone and she's like, well, I'll tell you about it, but you mind if I charge you for my time? And I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah.
So
I wish we got to start doing that.
I Venmo her $90 and we have a 30-minute conversation about tax deeds and everything. And I understand fully how to look up. So the people that were quote unquote selling this tax deed didn't even own the tax deed.
Plot twist.
And so from there, they effectively were just trying to pitch, and then we're going to try to buy it too. It was really weird.
So they're like wholesaling this tax deed?
That's the thing is, like, I don't think they actually had the rights to buy it, but maybe they thought in their mind, like, if they could come up with a buyer for $50,000, they could buy it off of someone for $50,000 or 40 or 30 and wholesale it to me.
Interesting. That's
so
a backwards way of doing wholesale.
It is. And effectively, you can get on a tax deed, like, list.
Yeah.
And this one, so there was a long list because it was in, the taxes had not been paid. Mm-hmm. And I went ahead and signed up, and I was like number 137, and they were on like person 3.
Oh, sheesh, wish. That's a long wait.
I was like, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the journey of like getting the lead, if you will.
Yeah. That's a winding road to get a lead.
Yeah.
But you learned about tax deeds, which a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, it's a whole strategy, right?
Yeah, it is.
And it's more of a long game strategy.
Yeah.
And with multifamily, if something does go into that, I think the list is pretty long.
Yeah,
multifamily is interesting in Birmingham, as you know.
Yeah.
It's just not it's not falling off trees.
No.
And, because we have more land.
Yeah.
So we still have multifamily, but it's not like highly populated areas like New York City.
Yeah, you would think that, a lot of those large buildings downtown that used to have apartments and stuff in them that are just falling apart, you'd think that something would happen with those.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of multifamily I think about, where you can just walk downstairs and you're on 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
Or 1st Avenue or whatever street that you're on, but it's not like that here.
Yeah.
It's just not.
It's different. So get this lead, and then I'm part of a real estate mastermind group, and we start talking about it, and they're like, well, go check out the property. So I drive by it, and through the sequence of events, I actually found that there was an owner of the property. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to worry about this tax deed. I'm going to just
go straight to him.
Go straight to the owner. So I go to these owners. I finally track them down through some skip tracing and different things, and talked to them and kind of was like, what's going on with the property? And they're like, we'll sell it. And they were like, we'll sell it for I think they wanted $120 for it or something. And I was like, okay, well, I'll think about it, And I ended up driving the property, and right on the side of the building, it said Myers Property. And I was like, interesting. Okay. So, actually, I'm going to take that back because I don't know if she would like that. Because I'll take their name out of it.
Okay.
So I ended up going ahead and just driving by the property, and I see what is the old owner of the property, the old manager / owner. At the time, I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But I have these, sellers who want to sell the property for what at the time I thought was too much, which it probably was. And then effectively, I have this other name and phone number. And I'm like, okay, I write it down and I call it.
Yeah.
And someone picks up.
Wow. It's like, okay, what do I do now? what do we talk about?
And I just say, hey, like, I'm interested in this property. I saw your name on the side. Like, and she goes, have you talked to, these people, the owners?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yes, ma'am. I've talked to him. She's like, well, and I was like, I haven't been able to get home in a little bit. She's like, well, if you talk to them, tell them that they owe me money.
Yikes. Now you're in the middle of the drama.
And this all came from a Facebook ad.
Wow, that's a windy road, dude.
And I just am kind of like next steps. Like, okay, call these people.
Keep plugging. A lot of people would have given up when they found out it was tax deed for somebody else.
I'm just crazy enough not to, I guess.
Proud of you. That's all I can say. Perseverance.
So I've got these owners wanting too much. This lady who says they own it, I said, tell me more. And she's like, well, I sold that to them and I did a loan on it.
Like seller finance loan? Like she
seller financed the loan.
Oh, and they just hadn't paid the taxes.
They hadn't paid the taxes. And I think their plan was to rehab the property.
Mm-hmm.
One of the units, there's 4 buildings, and one of them was actually burned out. And I think they were trying to litigate with the insurance company over it.
To have them, okay.
I'll be honest, I think it was arson. And they were trying, they realized they got into it and realized the rehab was too great.
Yeah.
And they tried to arson it to get their money back out and didn't work. That's my theory, but I don't want to.
Did they get caught?
We don't know. But at the end of the day, it was sitting because the insurance company wasn't paying out.
And they weren't.
They're just, yeah. That. So she has this note for effectively like $92,000. They haven't paid. They paid like 2 payments, and they're defaulted on the note. They haven't paid in like a year.
Those are the people that give seller finance and bad name.
Exactly. And then we have a situation where there's a tax deed on it, which can be claimed as well.
Yeah.
And so I kind of have all the players in this little puzzle.
Yeah.
And it started from this Facebook lead of someone who didn't even know any of this.
That's crazy.
And so I just start talking to this lady and talking to the guys some, and they're like, and I'm like, I could buy it for lower, and they're like, we ain't going, and then they kind of ghost me, and there's like, they ghosted her, and it's like, and so I'm in part of this mastermind group, right? And every step of the way, every week they'd be like, Todd, what's happening with the 32 door?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like there's a lot of things moving. So,
and effectively, one of the guys is like, so the note holder, and he's like, well, just go and buy the note and foreclose on foreclose on him, and explicit words,
Yeah.
And I was like, I had never. This is super early on. I had no idea you could buy debt.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've learned that now. But yeah, at the beginning, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. And there's maybe even people listening to this podcast.
That are probably
so
like,
explain,
Todd, Jordan, you're so stupid. How do you not know that?
How do you
sorry,
not know
guys.
that?
I'm sorry.
Some don't. But explain in basic terms. Let's pause for a minute.
Yeah.
You can buy debt just the same as you can buy a property.
It happens, and it's probably happened to a lot of people that are watching this, and they don't even realize it. When you go close on your primary house, especially right now, it's happening a lot. You go close on your primary house, and then a month later, you get a note from the person you close with that says, hey, so-and-so bank has purchased your loan. You'll be paying them from now on.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy because you've got the note, which is the debt that, is structured for the property. I will buy this property for XYZ terms. But then you've actually got like the mortgage, which is they're two separate things.
Right.
But you can go purchase this note for, let's say $100,000 for even numbers. I've got this note for this house, $100,000. You can come purchase that if this person needs money or doesn't want to deal with getting 30-year payments or whatever your structure is at a reduced rate. And now you own the debt that is covered by real property of some sort.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a layman's term of doing it. I started thinking about it.
Well, I mean, when you hear about collections, like, those are similar situations where there are collection agencies who still are working on behalf of the person owed. But at some point, that company literally sells that debt at a discounted rate.
40%,
even less.
Yeah.
They're like, I would rather get $100 on this credit card bill of 2,000 than nothing, and I'll let a company
if they want to go chase them down,
they want to figure it out.
Yes,
and so I think it's a good explanation. But I had no idea. I just didn't know that world.
I didn't either until a couple years ago.
And so he's like, if you own the note, they're defaulted on the note. All you have to do is foreclose on them.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
easy peasy.
So I go directly to the source. I'm the one person who is talking to me and being reasonable. And it's a solution for her because ultimately she doesn't want to foreclose on these guys. No. She doesn't want the property back.
No, she doesn't. She just wants them to pay.
Yeah. And I want the property. So I said, hey, I will buy the note. And so we start negotiating pricing.
Good.
And effectively, we came to where I basically bought the note at 60 cents on the dollar. It took 4 months to get there.
I mean, that's really not that long.
Yeah.
And considering the fact that one of the buildings is burned down and the people who are ghosting and haven't paid taxes, that's really not that bad.
Yeah, and it was just like weekly follow-ups of like, hey, do you want to sell the note? And she was like, let me think about it. 60
cents on the dollar for that. That kind of segues us into the financials because I'm curious about the financials of this now. I don't think we've ever dove this deep into this.
Yeah.
I think I've heard all the 1,000-foot views from you, but it's interesting, especially considering arson could have been involved. That's always interesting.
Yeah.
So 60 cents on the dollar for the note. You foreclosed on them.
I did not actually.
Oh, you didn't.
That's the second part of the story.
Let's take the segue back.
Third part, yeah.
Skirt, right back.
So I end up negotiating the deal. We close on that, and at that point, I was working with some guys, partnering with them. Because it was a little bit, I was starting to wade in waters, being super new. I'm like, I'm about to buy 32 doors of a trashed out, completely needing rehabbed apartment complex.
Which is what I tell new buyers to stay away from.
Yeah, it's like, and this is my first true deal.
Yeah.
Like up until that point, I literally had just turned my private residence into a rental.
Yeah.
That is all I had done.
Yeah,
I hadn't rehabbed, I hadn't bird.
Yeah.
It's basically my first deal.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to buy 32 doors for 60 grand.
Hey man, jump in the deep end.
So kind of brought in some guys who had more experience, more backing. And ultimately, because I was like, we need to buy this and then rehab it. And we're talking, I mean, we walked the property at this point. We had, seen it was completely done. It had been a dump zone for that whole area. So, I mean, we're probably talking about six rollways worth of 40-yard rollways just to get the trash off of the property.
Yeah.
Crazy amount of trash. So we walked it. We kind of had put together a budget, tried to figure out what it would cost. And I think the budget to rehab the whole place was $800K. So, I mean, I'm just looking at these numbers and I'm like, I'm willing to work on this, but I need some partners.
Yeah, that's a lot for your first deal.
So I bring in some partners and we do close on the note and we acquire the note, and then we start to talk with lawyers about the foreclosure process. And they suggested there's two things: you can foreclose or you can do what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And so if you foreclose, that property goes to the county courthouse steps.
Somebody else can purchase it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so if someone else purchases it, you get the note satisfied. So we would get our $90,000 note paid off.
Yeah.
But someone else would own the property, which we did not want.
Yeah, that defeats the purpose.
It's also bad for the seller because they have a foreclosure on their record. So it's more advantageous if you want the property to actually go through the process of deed and foreclosure. So that's what we did.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have not ever done that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, though.
it's a little bit of a different pathway. But like I said, I knew none of this. It was just asking questions and the next thing.
That's how you do it. That's crazy.
So we get the property, and we probably have about, in addition, have to pay off the taxes.
Yeah.
So that's a process. We reach out to the person who actually did have the tax deed, and we pay them off. And there's some additional fees and recording fees and lawyer fees.
Yeah.
And we probably, between tax deed and lawyer fees, paid another like $20,000 in fees to own the property.
Yeah, I'm assuming the guy that had the tax deeds didn't just give them to you for what he paid for them.
Yeah, you have to pay like some interest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but they can't just be like, well,
I bought it for $5, you owe me $20.
Yeah, they can't name their price. Like you as the property owner, I had the right to pay that off.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I honestly can't remember. I'd have to look back if we owned the property first after the deed in lieu, and then we executed the tax payment. I think that's what happened, because I think we had to actually own the property to have the right to pay it off. But part of me also thinks that maybe we paid it off because the time was starting to come up, and we really needed to do it. And we had interest in the property, and that allowed us the legality. I think actually that's what happened. We paid it off first. And then we effectively acquired the tax deed too, because we had interest in the property. But so I could be wrong on that.
Y'all are the
it's all a blur.
Y'all are the people, with that much cash. Y'all are the people that I tell my buyers, like, that ask about, it says the rights of redemption still apply. They can come back and purchase it. And I'm like, yeah, but that never happens. Like, hardly ever happens. Y'all are the people that
did it.
That made it happen. So it does happen.
It does happen.
And anybody that is my buyer that's watching this, it does happen. I said I'd never seen it before, but now I've just heard a story firsthand that says it happens.
And I think it'd be very different if there was all the rehab done. And I mean, it's just,
of course.
I mean, we're talking literally shells of property. So we have the property, we paid off the tax deed, and we're like, okay, let's start putting together the nuts and bolts of rehabbing this. And so the partners were actually part of they were doing a townhome project that was kind of getting delayed and really intensive, and so their time and focus wasn't on 32 doors. They were trying to get out of their other project, which I understand. And so we were kind of like, okay, let's talk to bankers, and it never happened, or like just different steps, because they were busy, and I get it. But we were 8 months down the road after actually having acquired the property. Nothing had happened. Nothing. And so, I mean, little bits here and there maybe of like, let's put a packet together of like trying to talk to a few banks.
Physically, there was nothing done on the property.
No. Hadn't been touched. And so we had these guys who were out of Utah, and they do some rehabbing in multifamily. And they're like, hey, why don't we buy the property? And I'm like, well, I don't want to sell the property.
I've just put a lot of time and effort into this.
And, it got to the point where like, we don't want to sell it. And they're like, but what would you want? And I'm like, we don't want to sell it. And so these conversations just happened for like 2 months. And then it got to the point with the partnership where I was like, we're not getting a lot of movement. Maybe we should entertain an offer, because I'm not going to take this on myself. And so started having the conversation, and one of the partners was like, which at the time I was like, holy cow, like how can we be at that evaluation? But, you got to think we were going to put about 800 into it, excuse me. And it was probably going to be worth like 1.3 at the time. Now it's probably even worth more, but, just from, projections.
Yeah. Of course.
And, so at that point, we effectively were like, let's entertain it. And so one of the buyers who had some experience with multifamily, one of the partners, he was like, tell him 300 grand. I'm like, you're crazy. But he's like, tell him 300 grand. That's our make us move price. And I was like, this is okay. I'll take it to him, because we're into the property for about 80K at this point.
Oh yeah, shoot. Yeah.
And I was like, 300. And he's like, that's probably where it should be. And I was like, okay, I'll take it to him. So I take it to him, and they're like, oh, we can't be there. But they were like, we could probably do 200. And my mind is blown. I'm like, holy cow, like we have 80 into this. they're saying 200, and he's like, counter at 290.
Oh my God.
But I mean, that's the beauty of a partnership, right? Is like they have experience sometimes in places you don't.
That's why you bring them on, because if you didn't learn all that, didn't know all that stuff, you would just do it yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
And so we negotiate back and forth for another like month and a half. They really wanted it. They kept going, and I was like, we kept playing hard to get. We ended up landing, selling that property for $275.
Wow.
It's crazy.
That is crazy.
So that was my first deal.
Well, that's one hell of a deal for doing no work. Well, you did work, but
yeah, I did a lot of work.
You did a lot of leg work, but you learned a lot.
I learned a ton,
which is worth something.
And you're right in the sense of like we didn't rehab it.
Yeah,
we literally just flipped it,
wholesaled it, a slow wholesale of a burnt down property and some shells.
Yeah. It was a wild ride, but it allowed me so that payout really, like, I made more doing that than I did at my W-2 because I'm still working at this time. I'm not in full-time real estate.
Oh,
I'm just doing this as a side hustle.
Oh,
and
so then it just hopped you right into.
I was like, I think it's time to move into real estate.
So you made more on that deal without really doing any physical work.
Yeah.
Than a month's salary, a year's salary?
A year's salary.
Yeah, it's time to jump. Time to jump ship.
In that one deal, and obviously those don't come across every day, but I was just like, I saw the opportunity of it, and I'd already kind of been, I mean, by that time I had other deals that I was working, and it wasn't the only thing I was doing. So it was a really cool catalyst. It's a very interesting story, and I thought it was worth sharing.
It's very windy.
Yeah.
And crazy.
Well, the deed in lieu part was interesting. Yeah, buying the note was interesting.
I've never bought a note or done deed in lieu.
Yeah.
But it is good to know that stuff.
I thought it was funny too, because like that whole story, like if you think about it, a pivotal moment. I don't think I would have known how to look up the note holder name.
Yeah, I don't even know how to do that.
So I mean, they're public record, right? Yeah. I could have figured it out, but I don't think I knew to do that or how to do it. Just driving by that property and seeing like the name and having a conversation like opened up so many doors.
Well, I mean, look at you now. You know what I mean? You're working for yourself.
I'm on a podcast.
You're on a podcast.
I mean, it's my own podcast, I guess it's your podcast.
Yeah, it's a collab. We said it from the get-go. My 12 viewers are gonna love it. I know. I know that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting deal, man.
So to segue, the last thing about this thing, which is very interesting, that property has traded hands 3 times.
Since then?
Since then.
Up in price?
Up in price every single time.
And nothing's been done to it, or?
So along the way, I think it's been fenced off. They cleaned up the trash, fenced it off, and I think maybe demoed the units. So there has been money been put into it kind of all along the way.
Wow.
And so I think the first time it traded after we sold it for $275 was in the 3s. And then it was in the 4s. And I think the most recent sale was like $525 or somewhere around there.
Real estate is just its own animal.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. When people ask me about investing tips or anything like that, I'm like, buy property.
Yeah.
And this is a prime example of it really don't matter what kind of property. Buy something.
Buy right.
Yeah, buy it right. You're great. Now you don't want to buy, a torn down house in Inslee for $150,000, right?
Yeah.
You'll be sitting on it for a while. But something like that that's just incredible, man. That's just crazy.
Yeah. It's a one-off. It's kind of a unique story, but I thought it was worth sharing.
Yeah. It's exciting.
Yeah.
And now you're in real estate, working for yourself.
Full time. Yep. Just wrapped up a flip.
Yeah.
So,
hey, how'd that go? I forgot. I haven't even asked you about that.
Yeah, so Hueytown is good. We haven't closed on it.
Okay.
So knock on table, not press board.
Knock on the plastic under here. Yeah.
But we got it under contract first weekend, which was great.
Yeah.
And really did a lot. We're probably into the rehab for about $20K more than we thought we would be.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a burnout. I had never done one of those.
I was worried about that when you picked it up because I've never done it. Not that it's not doable. People do it all the time, right? But because I haven't done it, and I know you hadn't done it before, except for, this arson
This
situation.
arson.
But
I need to stay away from
you need to stay away from burning things, man. But I was always worried. I just get so scared of those. Some people just, I don't think I ever want to do one personally.
Well, I think if we got it, like I bought it really well too.
Yeah.
Like I got it for 22.
Yeah, that helps.
And so I think there may have been honestly people who may have paid a little bit more for it, maybe not, but now that I've done a burnout, like I'm not afraid to do it. I just think I know you have to really buy them really stinking cheap.
Yeah, takes a lot of work.
It's so much work.
You're redoing it from the ground up.
Yeah, this lady's getting a brand new house from the walls in. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting too is even in the area, like because we took it down to the sticks, like she's getting insulation in all the exterior walls because that's code now. Yeah. Before it wasn't code. She's probably has the only house in that neighborhood that's fully insulated. So
good for her.
Yeah, so she's getting a great house. Yeah, and I partnered with Joe on it, and he's great, and we're both making money, not a crazy amount of money. Yeah, but learned a lot through it. Got to partner with him, which went really well.
Has he done burnouts before?
He has not done one either, so it was new for him too, and we both took a swing at it, and it turned out really great. So, and I'm proud of what we did, right? Yeah, like it's really nice.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures of it. It looks really nice. It looks very good.
You should go by it if you're ever in Hueytown, with all your extra time.
Yeah, I got a lot. Maybe I'll do it when I go to the dump tomorrow.
But yeah, man, I'm excited about your flip. I'll have to walk it. Yeah. I love that pocket, and ever since Red Mountain, it is worth noting, I always like to bring information about Birmingham. Yeah. So Red Mountain is like such a great park. It's super popular. That back parking lot wasn't always there.
No, this is new. It's like a year old.
Yeah, it's like year or two old. And I think it's going to really help that whole neighborhood continue to. I mean, there was talk of putting some retail potentially down there, and
interesting. So it's outside of that neighborhood. There's a little neighborhood, and this neighborhood, and that neighborhood is really good. But then you kind of go outside of that, and it's not a little as good. But you got to start somewhere. Yeah. I mean, you go right over that hill, and you're in the Ross Bridge area. Yeah. So it's not that far away from being really good.
No, and I mean, Birmingham Southern obviously got shut down, but I hate to. I mean that's sad, but I think that's too nice of a property not for someone great to come in and utilize it.
I hope I can get that.
Can we speculate?
Yeah, I'm speculating.
Oh yeah. You looked at a fiveplex near there.
Fiveplex. I threw in an offer that probably was a little bit too low, but it's the thing that made sense. Right. As a seller, you can't expect to sell a property based off of future potential. Yeah. It's just not how it works. So it hasn't got accepted yet, but we're following up on it.
Yeah, follow up, because I think sometimes people will. I mean, ultimately, you're a buyer at that price that's going to close it.
Yeah, and that's
what
I told
think
them.
A lot of people won't. They'll throw out a price,
but they won't actually.
They won't actually close it. Yeah, because they'll get into the weeds and be like, "Oh, I'm actually going to do my rehab budget now." Yeah. Oh wait, I'm way over on rehab budget. Yeah. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, and when I went and walked it, I looked through it, and that's my whole goal. Is when you're walking it, it's okay, I want to come in with no inspections so that I can be the guy that says this is my price. Here's my proof of funds from the bank. We can close X date. Yeah. The bank says is okay. When I'm walking through, I'm already looking at $5,000, $6,000, $8,000. Whatever it is that. Not that it's a special trade. I just walked through enough of them to have and I'm not always right. Anytime you take the walls down or something, you find it's always something, right? Yeah. But you're within a reasonable range. Yeah. So we'll see. Hopefully I get it. I want it.
I was talking with another agent too about square footage, and just kind of you get a sense of square footage after you've walked a lot of 13,000, 15,000, 2,000 square feet houses. Yeah. You're kind of this is about, I
always wonder how close I am. I always wonder, because this one that we got in Fairfield, they had it, the guy that wholesaled it to me had it as, I think it was 1,200 square feet. And I was like, it sure doesn't feel
feels bigger.
It feels bigger than 1,200 square foot. And there's a back part. It's got new wood, not new wood, but not the typical wood that was with the rest of the house. And I was like,
I bet you look at tax records.
I wonder, and it's not on tax records. So it makes me wonder if they just added it on, which happens all the time. Right. They don't want to get assessed for it. I don't want to get assessed for it. So,
Yeah.
you know, but I was like, this feels like about 1,600 square foot.
Yeah.
And that's about how big that room is.
There you go.
Superpowers of a real estate agent. Things that are worth nothing to the average person.
To the average person.
Yeah.
Well, this is fun, man.
Yeah, it was a blast, dude. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. We'll connect soon.
Yeah, for sure.